DFZRadio.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on DFZRadio.com.
Welcome to A Girl in a Garden on DFZRadio.com. This is your host, Emily, and today is March 17th, Tuesday, otherwise known as St. Patrick's Day. So, I found an article this morning, and it is everything you know about St. Patrick's Day is wrong. And I need to share it with you. Number 10. St. Patrick wasn't Irish. Historians believe he was born in England, Scotland, or Wales. Number 9. St. Patrick's color is blue, not green. Number 8. St. Patrick's Day as we know it was invented in America. St. Patrick's Day celebration began in the 18th century in American cities with large Irish immigrant populations. Number 7. March 17th is the day that St. Patrick died. Number 6. St. Patrick didn't drive all the snakes from Ireland, mainly because there was no evidence that snakes ever existed in Ireland. The climate is much too cold. Number 6. The shamrock isn't the symbol of Ireland. Sure, you can find shamrocks all over the Emerald Isle, but the real symbol is the harp. Number 4. This one's a crazy one. St. Patrick's Day used to be a dry holiday. Today, the holiday is a great excuse to start drinking Guinness at 9 a.m., but until 1970, all pubs in Ireland were closed in observance of the religious feast day. Number 3, and I know everyone's running out to have this for as a meal today. Corned beef and cabbage isn't a traditional Irish dish. It's about as Irish as spaghetti and meatballs. Stick with Guinness. Number 2. There are more Irish people living in the U.S. than Ireland. The population of Ireland is 4.2 million. In contrast, there are around 34 million people of Irish descent living in America. And number 1. Hate to break it to you. The odds of finding a 4-leaf clover are slim to none. 1 in 10,000 to be exact. So with that, happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope everyone has a safe holiday. If you are drinking, because it seems to be the number 1 drinking holiday besides Halloween, please don't drive and take a cab home or Uber or Lyft or anything but driving. I will say in my younger years, St. Patrick's Day was one of my favorite holidays. And these days I happen to live in a college town. So I will pass on going out in a college town. I have a low tolerance of drunk people. So everyone have a safe and sane holiday, have a good one, have a green beer, have some corned beef and cabbage, even though it's not Irish. So this last weekend, I went and renewed my community garden plots. I have a 15 by 15 area at an organic community garden in Rohnert Park. And today we'll be going over some of the rules and regulations that help make a successful community garden. And it happens to be a question that people ask me pretty often. So we'll be going over that later in the show. And so this weekend I got out on Sunday and went and worked in my garden. mainly weeding. And it's been quite a few months since I've had a chance to go there, mainly because in the rainy season, part of the community garden floods and it gets so muddy and dirty. So it's been a few months since I've been to the garden. And even though I did this Sunday, I am so sore today from spending a few hours bending over and weeding. But I have one garden bed completely prepped for the garden season. And then the other two garden beds are about halfway weeded. One actually still has some radicchio growing in it, and the rest of it I need to get all those weeds out of there. And the joys of weeding. It seems like a never-ending process. There's many ways you can kill weeds, as we talked about last week. And I went with the old-fashioned method of pulling them out by hands. And gardening is good therapy because it makes you go work in the dirt and sweat, and it's good therapy. We'll leave it that way. So it was a great time working in the garden. I'm looking forward to heading to the San Francisco Flower and Garden Show next weekend in San Mateo and grabbing some plants so I can start planting my raised beds. So we are going to take a brief break, hear from a Girl in a Garden sponsors, and then come back to talk about the rules and regulations of a successful community garden and some of the rules that you have to think about and that evolve over time as you interact with different people that all have the love of gardening, but there's always something that goes on in a community garden. So we will be right back, and this is Emily on DFCRadio.com.
Someone warm them from below till the rain comes tumbling down. Pulling weeds and picking stones.
We're listening to DFCRadio.com.
A Girl in a Garden quick tip. Plant marigolds around your garden. American and French marigolds kill nematodes in your soil. Marigold roots release chemicals that are deadly to nematodes but do not hurt your plants. For more information and tips, tune in Tuesday at 5 p.m. on DFCRadio.com.
Here at Green Grow, we take organic gardening seriously. With our mycorrhizae products, you'll increase growth and help reduce the need to replace old, worn-out soil. We help provide electrolytes and maximize nutrient intake to make your indoor garden lush and green. So give your plants the strength that they need and breathe life into your soil with Green Grow. Find us at your local nursery or visit us at thegreengrow.com. That's thegreen.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on DFCRadio.com.
DFCRadio.com.
Community gardens are an absolutely wonderful place to grow your own food and meet like-minded people who are into gardening. And it's a place that you can grow food, especially if you live in an area or a place where you don't have any land of your own to use. So if you're an apartment dweller like I am, a community garden is an excellent place for me to be able to go out and garden. But that also means behind every successful community garden is a big set of rules. And this is a question that I've been asked several times is, what are these rules? And how do you run a successful community garden? Well, I just re-upped my garden plot, and I just got a big information and guidelines packet, which I wanted to share with my listeners. So, number 1 on the list is the gardener. A gardener is an individual, 18 years of age or older, who has rented a plot. And there can be more than one gardener per household. There's 2 types of gardeners. A returning gardener, who is a gardener who rented a plot from the previous garden year, and there is a new gardener. A new gardener is a gardener who did not rent a plot the previous garden year. The garden year, which is defined in number 2 of this list, gardeners rent plots March 1st of the current year through February 28th of the following year. And there is an elected board to help run the community garden. And during the January volunteer board meetings, gardeners elect an annual volunteer board. This consists of a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer to help manage the community garden. And the elected board volunteer holds office between March 1st and February 28th, which is the same terms as the garden year. Now, the volunteer board meeting, this is something that's held monthly, and all gardeners are encouraged to attend the volunteer board meeting to hear garden news and to share in discussions about the gardening. These ones have been set up 6 p.m. the first Wednesday of every month, and they run from April through November, and then one in January to elect the volunteer board member. And one of the requirements of this garden is you have to do 8 hours of community garden service in order to be in good standing with the garden so you can renew your plot the next year. And if you want to be on the volunteer, you have to have a garden plot for at least a year and be in good standing by December 1st of the year in order to be elected for the following year. And the volunteer board meetings do count as credit for volunteer hours. You just have to be on time and sign in to earn the credit towards your 8 hours of community garden service. Number 5 on the list is how to contact the volunteer board. This is for community garden related questions and concerns. They're directed directly to the volunteer board when they're present at the community garden, or you can email or actually send some snail mail over to them. Email is a great way to get in contact with people. And if gardeners do have issues, concerns relating to the garden plot, they're advised to contact the volunteer board rather than the Rohnert Park city staff, the school district, because this land is on school district property, or law enforcement. And these types of issues at the community garden should be discussed and resolved within the community garden organization. Now, security is a big thing. Our community garden is located in an isolated location on a narrow country road. Obviously, the garden is not lighted, so gardeners need to use common sense so that when they safely use the garden. A security fence does surround the garden, and the entrance is through a gate which has a combination lock. Gardeners are provided with the combination when they rent the plots, and they're asked not to give the combination out to other people or post it where people can read it. And when gardeners are alone in the garden, they're advised to keep the gate locked, and when they leave, they need to lock it. The gardening hours are from sunrise to sunset, and always advised to carry a cell phone with them. And I have gardened a few times in the later days, and I've been the only person there, and I remember someone pulled up to a plot, backed their truck in, harvested a whole bunch of corn, and left. And a fellow garden member gave them the combination and told them to go harvest stuff from their plots, and come to find out those people had no reason or business to ever be at the community garden plot. So it can be disconcerting, and there is a reason why these rules are made to have a successful community garden. So the next one on the list, number 7, is the plot. A standard plot is approximately 15 by 15 feet. Plots are bounded on all sides by pathways and access ways. To maintain right of entry throughout the community gardens, gardeners must not expand their plots into existing paths or access ways, or remove paths between the adjoining plots. Gardeners should keep plants from growing into or blocking paths and access ways. Now, this rule is very important because this seems to be an issue almost every single year. Some people will plant crops that are inappropriate for the space and they grow into public areas, and someone can fall down, they're encroaching on other people's space, and when you're trying to move a wheelbarrow through the spaces and someone's plants are overgrown into it, it can be frustrating. And it seems like this is one of the very important rules when having a community garden. So number 8 is access ways, and main access ways in the garden serve as a fire and emergency vehicle lanes, so they must be kept clear. Access ways may be used for temporary pickup or delivery of bulky and heavy materials, but gardeners shall not park personal vehicles on access ways or leave tools, hoses, and other obstructions on the access way. There's also paths. Number 9. Pedestrian paths are bound each plot. Paths provide access to water bibs and hoses. Gardeners must maintain paths adjacent to their plot in a neat, clean state. Maintenance includes constant, removing weeds and putting a layer of bark down. Gardeners who share paths with nearby gardeners are encouraged to work together to determine how much equality maintain shared paths so they can remain tidy and weed-free and no one does more work than they really need to. Gardeners should also keep paths clean of tools, garden plants, hoses when not in use, and any other obstructions. Gardeners are not permitted to cultivate any kind of plants in the pedestrian pathway, which include paths to the tool shed, grape arbor, greenhouse, or on the pathway on the inside of the community garden's perimeter fence line. Gardeners are reminded that trees are not allowed at the community garden. And this can be another issue that seems like when people are having a community garden meeting, the biggest complaints is access ways and paths and people blocking access, not putting tools away, and having those plants that are actually not supposed to be in the community garden at all still there and active. So, number 10, the assignment of plots. So, due to demand for plots, gardeners should only reserve a number of plots they can cultivate and maintain. Returning gardeners and new gardeners must be present to rent existing plots or to sign up for new plots. In general, plots will be assigned to rent in 2 stages. So A, during February, returning gardeners who are in good standing and have completed the required 8 hours of community garden service by December 1st have the opportunity to rent the same plot they rented the most garden year. And then B, during March, returning gardeners who have an opportunity to rent additional plots or different plots they have previously rented. New gardeners can also rent a plot during March. New gardeners only allowed to rent 1 plot. Plots are rented during March are first come, first serve. Plots cannot be transferred, exchanged, or sublet to another person who is not of the same household and address. The volunteer board will announce the dates and times of new and returning gardeners so they can come and rent the garden plot. Here's another really important rule, the maximum allowable plots. Now this garden is a little bit different because they allow people to have a 15 by 15 area and more than 1 plot. Some community gardens, they will just have a raised bed or a very small area. Some will have a larger space, but there's rules to go with it. So unless an exception is voted on and approved by the volunteer board, new gardeners are only allowed to rent 1 plot. New gardeners who complete the required community garden hours and are in good standing may rent a second plot as a returning gardener in the year 2. A third plot in year 3 to a maximum of 4 plots in the 4th consecutive year, provided the plots are available. So you can start out with 1 and you can have 4 plots total. So that's 15 by 15 feet, and you can have up to 4 plots if you're in good standing. Gardeners who don't complete the required number of community garden hours by December 1st of the garden year will revert back to a new gardener status in the upcoming gardener year. And they will only be able to rent 1 plot after May 15th. Also, gardeners whose plots are severely unkept and pose other serious risk reverting to new gardener status for the upcoming year. In some cases, the volunteer board may anonymously decide the gardener is not allowed to rent plots the upcoming year. And there is an exception to the bullet number 1 for the new gardeners. If plots are still available to rent as of May 15th, returning gardeners can add their name to a waiting list to express interest in renting additional plots. Number 12, the waiting list. The community garden may establish a waiting list of gardeners interested in maintaining additional plot for a portion of the garden year. When plots become available, first priority is given to individuals on the waiting list who don't already have a plot. New gardeners are always encouraged. A returning gardener who has 1 plot has priority over a returning gardener with 2 plots. And it will do the same thing for someone who has 2, will have more priority with someone with 3, and same with 4 plots. Gardeners with 4 plots who want to rent additional plots can add their name to a waiting list. However, they're only able to rent 5 or more plots for the remainder of the current year. In the upcoming garden year, they will revert back to the maximum allowable number of 4 plots. If a gardener has not properly cultivated and maintained the plots they currently rent, they will not be allowed to add their name to the waiting list for additional plots. Now, what happens if you get really busy and you just don't have time? Well, there's a rule for that. Number 13, abandoning plots. If a gardener decides to abandon their plot, they must inform the volunteer board in writing or by email. The volunteer board will provide the gardener a reasonable period of time to remove any personal property from the plot. The volunteer board will make the plot available to another gardener according to the guidelines of the waiting list. If the gardener abandons their plot, they may apply for a plot as a new gardener in the upcoming year. If a gardener wishes to abandon his or her rented plots, the gardener may receive full reimbursement if the garden board is notified in writing before April 15th or within 2 weeks of the plot rental of the rented date. Number 14, cultivating plots. Gardeners who rent plots have an obligation to gardeners not able to rent a plot and those on the waiting list. Gardeners should start cultivation of their plots within a reasonable time given weather conditions. Gardeners should allow to cultivate and maintain their plot during the garden year. And this always seems to be a complaint at the garden. There's been quite a few people who's rented plots, and it has gone completely to weed, and they don't garden for a few months at a time. And the weeds become annoying to the neighbors. The neighbors need to fill in the walkways and pathways, and they can have a chance of losing their plot for not maintaining it. So the next rule, maintaining plots. Gardeners who have rented plots have an obligation to all other gardeners in the community garden. Gardeners must maintain their plots and surrounding areas in a clean, safe manner. Plots and surrounding areas should be kept free of weeds, pests, and plant diseases while honoring organic gardening principles. Crop residue, such as corn stalks, tomato vines, and other plant material, should be removed at the end of the growing season. Gardeners should remove and trim all disease and pest-infested plants. Now here's the most important rule. Gardeners may not plant invasive or poisonous plants anywhere in the community garden. And these plants are not limited to, but they do include mint, bamboo, blackberry, castor bean, lemon balm, and morning glory. And mint has been planted somewhere in our garden, and it is an invasive weed. Mint should be grown in containers away from a community garden plot because it spreads. Also, there's unworked plots. So here's another rule. By May 1st, unworked plots may be determined to be abandoned by the volunteer board. Plots are deemed abandoned by the gardener may be determined by the following. Failure to contact the garden board of personal problems or situations that interfere with the normal community garden plot responsibilities. Obvious failure to cultivate plots or work the soil within 60 days of rental. Failure to provide basic garden plot upkeep requirements. Lack of general weed control and overall obvious neglect in the garden. Now, trees and shrubs are not to be planted in the plots or access ways. Part of this is trees require a lot more water, and they are permanent. This garden area is not permanent, and it does require quite a bit of water, so it's not fair to other people who might rent land in the future. So only green waste should be deposited in the community garden compost area. Disease, pest-infested material, non-combustible solid waste should be placed in the trash receptacle provided at the community garden interest. Household waste should not be stored on plots or disposed of in the community garden area. Some people will clean out their cars at the community garden. Not appropriate. 16. Gardener absences. So gardeners may make arrangements to have fellow gardeners, family, or friends take care of their plots when they're ill or on vacation. If an illness is extended or the gardener will be on vacation for more than 2 weeks, a gardener or an immediate family member should contact the board in writing or by email. The board needs to be aware of who is maintaining the plot in the gardener's absence and who to contact if questions or issues arise in the gardener's plots. Now, there's also a community garden fee, and for this garden, it's very inexpensive. The current community garden fee is $30 per plot, per garden year, or a fraction of it. The fee is paid when new and returning gardeners register to rent the plots. Fees collected go towards expenses, tools, repairs, water, trash can rental. We have a porta potty because there is no restrooms. This is where some of the money goes to. The next rule, non-commercial use. Flowers and produce gardeners have grown at the garden is only for non-commercial use. Gardeners should not sell flowers and produce they grew at the community gardens to others. So the community garden is land that you are supposed to use for yourself or share your bounty with other people. You are not supposed to profit off your land use. And community garden hours. During each year, the gardeners are required to complete 8 hours of community garden hours. Gardeners can earn community garden hours by attending the monthly volunteer board meeting and by helping during designated community garden workdays. On occasion, the volunteer board can provide gardeners with a list of projects that can be completed to earn community garden hours. Only the projects that have been pre-selected by the board will be allowed to be counted towards the 8 hours of community garden service. The required 8 hours of community gardens must be completed by December 1st of the garden years. Gardeners who don't complete the required 8 hours of garden will be considered a new gardener in the upcoming year. Gardeners are required to record the following information in the work record book in the mailbox at the garden or notify the board via email within 5 days of the completion of work, as only work that can be verified by the volunteer board will be counted towards the 8 hours of community service. You have to write your name, date completed, amount of time, and specific details of what you did and location. Weeding, cultivating, or maintaining another gardener's plot does not count as your community garden hours unless the volunteer board specifically assigns or approves it as a project eligible for community garden hours. Community garden hours are earned for work completed in common areas. Guests and visitors. Guests and visitors may enter the community garden, but only in the company of a gardener. Guests need to abide by the standards of this document, and gardeners are responsible for the behavior of guests. Gardeners are also liable for any damages or losses suffered in the garden caused by their guests' actions. Children. The community garden encourages children to visit and enjoy the garden. However, tools, power equipment, constructions, and some plants at the community garden can be hazardous to children. Therefore, children should be under supervision of the gardener at all times. Children are also not allowed to run, play, or remove plants and other items from people's plots. Pets. This is another important one. This causes issues at some of the meetings. Gardeners may bring friendly pets to the community garden. To protect the safety of the gardeners, guests, and visitors, pets should be licensed, have a collar and leash, and be under the control of the gardeners at all times. Gardeners must clean up after their pets. And then respect to other gardeners. All gardeners must cooperate so that the community garden is neighborly, secure, and peaceful place. Gardeners should not harvest or remove plants from gardeners' plots without their permission. Use aggressively loud, abusive, or profane language when speaking to other gardeners, visitors, or guests. Be discriminatory to or toward other gardeners, visitors, and guests, or play music that disrupts the peace and serenity of the community garden. Gardeners are encouraged to wear headphones while listening to music or adjust the volume so the music doesn't disrupt others' enjoyment of the garden. These rules seem very small, but they are very important rules. Now, health and safety of the garden. Gardeners agree to promote and protect the community garden as a safe, healthy environment. Gardeners should not cultivate illegal or poisonous plants, possess or use illegal substances at the garden, bring firearms or other weapons to the garden, physically or verbal abuse of gardeners, visitors, or guests, no gambling or drinking alcohol beverages on the community garden. I'll say I break that rule sometimes. Sometimes a nice cold beer working in the garden is amazing. They also cannot come to the garden under the influence of alcohol or other drugs, smoke or chew tobacco within the garden area, or have any campfires or fireworks in the garden. Common areas. The community garden includes certain common areas. The flower garden along the road, the parking area, the main access ways for emergency vehicles, the shade arbor, tool sheds, the greenhouses, compost area, and 6-foot pathway around the inside of the perimeter of the fence. All gardeners share a common responsibility to maintain these common areas. Gardeners should prevent damage in these areas. Also, cleaning up in these areas are counted in your community garden service hours. So, maintenance of common areas. As a condition of renting the plots, gardeners are required to complete the 8 hours of community service. Community hours are used in maintaining common areas of the garden. There are volunteer community garden work days that are posted by email, and most of that time is spent maintaining the common areas. Now, this garden is a little bit different because they provide tools and equipment, and this is not the case for most gardens. It's very nice. So there are rules, though. Common tools and equipment. Some garden tools and motorized equipment are available at the community garden for the gardener's use. These tools include mowers, wheelbarrows, shovels, and other common garden tools. The community garden does not provide a rototiller or hoses for gardeners. Garden tools and equipment are not to be removed or borrowed from the community garden for home use. And it seems like someone does it every single year, and we all get emails, please bring the wheelbarrows back. It's frustrating to the other community garden members. Tools and equipment are stored in the tool shed. Garden tools are marked with orange paint belonging to the community garden. Gardeners may use these tools and equipment at a first-come, first-served basis. Gardeners should return tools and equipment to the tool shed when they have finished using what's available, and they should not be left in gardeners' plots overnight. The next one, gardeners' supplies, tools, and equipment. So this is your own personal equipment. The community garden does not provide all tools, equipment available that the gardener might need. Gardeners bring supplies, tools, and equipment from home. Gardeners are not advised to leave these supplies overnight and to take the supplies and tools home when not in use. In some cases, gardeners store supplies, tools, and equipment on their plots. Please attach a label with your name on it so someone does not use it. And gardeners should not borrow or remove any tools from someone else's plot without permission. The volunteer board and the garden is not responsible for any damage and theft if it is left in the plot. Mulch. This garden occasionally receives free deliveries of wood chips and mulch. Gardeners may use this material on a first-come, first-served basis, and this should be put around the garden plots and pathways to maintain weed control. This garden also has a compost area, and the compost area is maintained by the gardener, and it should only be depositing green waste from their plots in the compost area. So no garbage, diseased plants, or pest-infested plants, or waste that will attract animals go in the compost area. And due to its invasive nature, mint and morning glory should never be placed in the compost area. Compost gardeners may use the compost to amend soil in their plots. When disposing of things that should not be in the compost pile, they need to go directly into the garbage. Now, this garden is an organic garden, so we talk about organic methods. The community garden is an organic gardener. Gardeners should only use organic fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. When purchasing these items, choose those that state organic or for organic gardening with the OMRI label, which is Organic Material Review Institute, or with an NOP, National Organic Product. They can only use organic compost in the plots. And they're encouraged to avoid genetically engineered seeds and plants. And as everyone knows, if you are a home gardener, genetically engineered seeds and plants are not available to the home gardener. Cover crops. Gardeners are encouraged to plant cover crops. Cover crops help suppress weeds, build productive soil, and help control pests and disease. Cover crops will not be consumed should they be cut and tilled in the soil before going to seeds. Examples of cover crops include fava beans, winter rye. Cover crops may be planted any time during the garden year, but traditionally are planted at the start of winter or wet season. This helps prevent erosion, and if you're using fava beans, it adds the nitrogen-fixing plants. They can be planted on all or a portion of the plot when not in use. Now, beehives. Bees are important. Many pesticides are killing bees, and this garden plot happens to have 2 beehives. Gardeners must contact the volunteer board in order to obtain approval before bringing a beehive to the garden. Gardeners who have beehives on the garden take responsibility for properly maintaining the hives during the garden year. If safety issues come up, the volunteer board may request a gardener to remove the beehive from the garden. We also have water that's provided with the garden plots. Water bibs are located throughout the community garden. Gardeners are encouraged to be responsible, water-wise gardeners and conserve water at all times. Water should only be used for irrigation of garden crops. Gardeners must be present while watering the plots and turn off water before leaving the garden. Water timers, because of its potential of mechanical breakdown, are not allowed at the garden. Gardeners must report minor water leaks and water system maintenance to the volunteer board immediately. And this is another very important thing. We are in a drought in California, and it seems that every year someone forgets to turn the water off and ends up flooding the plots and wasting water. Now, these lists, and it keeps going on and on about what kind of communications you can have at the garden. We have a volunteer board at the garden, and it can be flyers, announcements, gardening website, volunteer notes, email if appropriate. Use common sense when posting information. And revisions to the community garden guidelines can be done at any time at discretion of the board. And a current copy of the community garden information and guidelines is also available in the community garden mailbox in the Arbor area. Number 40 of this list, and this is the last one. This is a big long list. In order to have a successful community garden, when a gardener fails to adhere to the guidelines contained in the document or issues arise as deemed unsafe or inappropriate for the garden, the volunteer board will respectfully and confidentially contact the garden to resolve the situation. Each situation may differ, but the general steps of the volunteer board will take are: determine if the gardener is not observing a guideline, provide written, electronic, or verbal notice to the garden, remind the gardener of the guideline, provide an interpretation of the guideline as appropriate, offer suggestions to help the gardener meet the guideline, share what the gardener needs to do to meet the guideline and deadline for compliance, and explain the consequences if the gardener fails to comply to the deadline. Provide final notice to the gardener before the deadline occurs, and implement consequences if the gardener fails to comply by the deadline. Now, if a dispute issue arises between 2 or more gardeners, the volunteer board may have to bring the gardeners together to resolve the situation in a respectful, non-confrontational manner. Now, this sounds like a lot of rules, but this makes it so a community garden can have a nice, happy community, and all the gardeners get to have fair use of their garden plots and fair use of the community garden area, and have it pleasant for any guests who might happen to visit the community garden. Now, not all of these rules are required, and some gardens even have more rules. But in order to have the successful garden, rules or bylaws should be followed and set up and potentially changed every year until a happy fit is found for that specific garden. Now, this garden that I'm part of and I love, this is my second year doing it, it has beehives. It has a greenhouse. It has a tool shed. It has an arbor area with grapes. It has a compost pile. It has bat boxes, and you get to meet people from all walks of life. And sometimes you might go, well, I probably wouldn't talk to them if I knew them in real life, and other times you just have to say hi, and headphones are a great way to to get your garden work done. But it's a great community. They have community work days every week, Every month, there's a community garden potluck. There's information being sent out and shared. So it's a great way to interact with your community, share plants, grow fruits and vegetables, save money on your food. So those were just some of the rules of the community garden that I am part of. And I will continue to be part of this year. So that's what it takes to run an organic community garden. Until next time, this is Emily on dfcradio.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on dfcradio.com.
dfcradio.com.
A girl in a garden quick tip. Have you ever been cooking and added too much salt to something? Well, with soup, you can add in some cut up potatoes, throw them in the soup, and let it simmer for about 10 minutes. It will absorb the excess salts, and once you remove them, the dish tastes better. So for more information and tips, tune into A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com, 5 p.m. Tuesdays.
Here at Green Grow, we take organic gardening seriously. With our mycorrhizae products, you'll increase growth and help reduce the need to replace old, worn-out soil. We help provide electrolytes and maximize nutrient intake to make your indoor garden lush and green. So give your plants the strength that they need and breathe life into your soil with Green Grow. Find us at your local nursery or visit us at thegreengrow.com. That's the green, GRO.com.
dfcradio.com.
You're listening to A Girl in the Garden on dfcradio.com.
Welcome back to A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com. This is your host, Emily. And a few weeks ago, I went down to LA and attended my first board meeting. And I am a board member of the Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation. And I am very happy to be a part of this project. And it's a few years underway already, but we are just starting the kickoff. So the Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization committed to improving social, economical, and environmental well-being of individuals, schools, communities, and organizations. Our priority is to encourage awareness and enthusiasm for healthy living options through the provision of hydroponic and gardening services and programs. Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation is dedicated to empowering those we serve to develop and maintain overall healthy lifestyles. Utilizing a holistic approach, Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation teaches participants the fundamentals of gardening and hydroponics, promotes healthy eating options to reduce the risk associated with obesity, iron deficiencies, and chronic disease such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes, and provide guidance and encouragement to participants to respect and appreciate the environment. Free or low-cost programs provided by Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation include hydroponic and gardening 101 instruction, community gardens and beautification, local farmers markets, agricultural development, horticultural education, therapeutic gardening, family bonding workshops, sustainable living, and volunteering and community building. Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation provides goods and services to individuals, schools, groups, or organizations from startup to maintenance to sustainability. An example of good range from startup hydroponic equipment for a small garden in a classroom to numerous grow boxes outside in soil covering an outdoor area. Examples of services Watch It Grow Urban Foundation provide include educational classes, consultation, and volunteer. Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation is committed to our vision to improve in social, economic, and environmental well-being of local community in a safe, clean, and nurturing way. So that is the summary of the Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation. And this is something that Joe and Maddie have been working on for a long time. So we were able to have the first board meeting, and as I said, I'm very excited to be part of it. The vision is aimed at educating community schools and shelters on how to cultivate a sustainable garden. And Joe has this theory, which is absolutely correct, and I love this. There's 3 ways that you garden: for food, fun, or profit. And so those are some of the education that goes into why are you gardening? What's it for? Food, fun, or profit? And it's a great fundamental way to think about what gardening is. And I'm looking forward to having things coming up with this project. So more information will be coming soon, but you can follow the Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation on Facebook. Just type that in. Watch It Grow Urban Gardening Foundation. You can find it on Facebook. I just repeated myself. And on May 2nd, we will be doing a grand opening party plant sale. And it should be at Watch It Grow in Downey, California. So I will be down there for that. And as the event approaches, I will definitely be talking about it quite a bit more, because it's a great project, and it's a great project to get the community involved and community members. And I just keep repeating myself today, but great project, something to be involved with. I get to say I'm a board member of something and make a change in other people's lives and talk about my passion, gardening. So this next week, I will be attending the San Francisco Flower and Garden Show in San Mateo, California. It's one of my favorite garden shows. It's huge, has educational workshops, shopping, display gardens. You get to meet like-minded people. There's seminars, bonsai area, kids area. So of course I will take lots of pictures and share it all. I will be also giving you an update on what I'm working on in my garden and some of the prep work that's going on, at least in my gardening zone, which is 7B. Unfortunately, there's still quite a few people that are covered up in snow. So until next week, this is Emily on A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
This phenomenon, had to put it in a song, and it goes like,
We're listening to DFC Radio.